"Hey son, do you remember this blanket?" The words are quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of voices and the soft clink of champagne glasses. But they stop Ethan Vance in mid-step. He turns, scanning for the speaker, and finds her, an elderly woman standing near the back of the auction hall. She isn't dressed like the others. No diamonds, no polished designer gown, just a pale blue cardigan with loose threads at the cuff and a long skirt that brushes her ankles. In her hands, she holds a small, faded blanket. The sight of it is strangely arresting. The room smells faintly of polished wood and expensive perfume, the kind of scent that usually puts him at ease. Tonight, it feels distant. His gaze drops to the corner of the blanket, where frayed stitches curl into the letters EV. His chest tightens without warning. A young boy no more than 8, weaves between the rows of chairs, chasing the slow roll of a toy car. The car bumps against the woman's shoe. She bends slightly, picking it up, and hands it back to him with a smile. "Thanks, lady," the boy says before darting off. Her hand lingers in the air a moment longer, and when she looks back up, her eyes find Ethan again. This time they don't move. He swallows. It's just a coincidence, he tells himself. The initials, the color, plenty of blankets look like that. And yet, the shade of cream, now dulled to a yellowed hue, and the faint blue border, remind him of something he once saw in an old photograph. Something his nanny said had been lost when he was still small enough to be carried. The auctioneer's voice rises over the speakers, announcing the next item. Applause ripples, a few glasses clink. He should be heading back to his table. He's here as the evening star donor, the one they'll photograph shaking hands with the Children's Foundation director. Instead, he stands rooted. The woman takes a slow step forward, the overhead lights catch in the silver strands of her hair, and for a moment she looks almost fragile enough to blow away. "You don't remember me, do you?" she says. Her voice is low, not meant for anyone else. Ethan feels the faintest shift in the air, the kind of pause when the world carries on moving, but you know you're standing somewhere you didn't plan to be. "I think you have the wrong," he begins. "I made it for you," she interrupts, lifting the blanket slightly, as if offering proof. Her fingers clutch the edge, knuckles pale. "When you were just a baby." The sound of glasses being set down on linen, the murmur of polite conversation, all of it seems farther away now. He catches himself tightening his grip on the program in his hand. A waiter passes between them, carrying a tray of empty flutes. The faint scent of citrus cleaner drifts in his wake. It's enough to make Ethan blink, to remind himself where he is. This is just a stranger, a charity auction, a distraction. But then she shifts her weight and the blanket slips slightly, revealing a section of worn fabric so thin the light passes through. He imagines small fingers once curled around it, the warmth of skin pressed against its weave. His breath catches, not from memory exactly, but from something deeper, a pull he can't name. "Why bring it here?" His voice is quieter than he intends. Her eyes soften though her hands remain steady. "I heard you set to be here tonight." For a moment, neither of them moves. The chatter continues around them, laughter from a corner table, a polite cheer, as a painting is sold. Someone nearby remarks on the wine selection. It all feels oddly unimportant. The boy with the toy car returns, this time slower, holding his mother's hand. He glances up at Ethan and grins, as if they share a secret. Ethan's gaze follows the boy until he disappears again, swallowed by the crowd. Something about the easy trust in that smile leaves a faint ache in his chest. When he looks back, the woman is still watching him. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she says. "I only thought, maybe you want to see it again." He doesn't answer. Somewhere near the stage, the auctioneer calls for a brief intermission. People rise, stretch, mingle. A hand rests lightly on Ethan's shoulder, his assistant, murmuring something about preparing for his speech. He nods without really hearing. By the time he looks back toward the woman, a few guests have stepped between them. He shifts, trying to see around them, but she's gone. Only the faint smell of old fabric lingers in his mind, and the way her voice had caught ever so slightly on the word baby. Those stitches, they sear crooked. The thought slips into Ethan's mind as he stares at the memory lingering from earlier. Crooked stitches, not the kind you'd see on a store-bought blanket. The kind someone makes by hand, every imperfection part of its charm. He's back at his table now, a glass of still water in front of him. The rim leaves faint rings on the linen every time he sets it down. Conversation hums around him, donors discussing investments, vacation homes, upcoming galas. He nods occasionally, saying little, his focus drifts. Across the room, a waiter drops a fork. The metallic clatter makes him glance toward the sound. For a second he thinks he sees the woman again, near the far wall, the blanket still in her hands. But it's just someone in a similar cardigan, flipping through the auction catalog. His assistant leans over. "You stir up, after the next item," she says quietly, tapping the program. Short speech, hand over the oversized check, smile for the cameras. The usual. "Right," he murmurs. His voice feels further away from his own ears than it should. A man at the next table laughs loudly, the kind of laughter that fills a room without permission. The sound is warm but fleeting. Ethan takes another sip of water, watching condensation bead on the glass. It's absurd, he tells himself, to let one odd encounter shift his mood. People mistake him for someone else all the time. It's the curse of being both wealthy and occasionally in the press. And yet, the blanket's initials were identical to his own. Evie, not a coincidence in itself, but paired with the exact shade of blue thread his nanny once described when talking about the blanket she'd lost. That unsettles him. He pushes his chair back slightly. The fabric catches on the carpet, making a soft scraping sound. The movement draws the attention of a young volunteer standing near the table. She's holding a tray of small desserts, each topped with a single raspberry. "Would you like one, Mr. Vance?" she asks, her voice gentle. He shakes his head. "No thank you." Her eyes flick toward the stage, then back to him. "You looked, I don't sit no far away for a moment." The comment surprises him. "Maybe I was." She smiles in that unself-conscious way only young people seem to manage. "Happens to me in math class." She moves on, offering the desserts to the next table. The remark lingers, far away. Yes, that's exactly how it feels, like his thoughts have stepped outside the noise and light of the auction, and wandered down a corridor of memory he hasn't opened in years. A burst of applause pulls him back. The latest auction item, a vintage piano, has just sold. The auctioneer calls for the next lot. It's a set of antique quilts, each hand-stitched, their edges worn but intact. Ethan's gaze narrows. The stage lighting catches the textures, and for a split second one quilt's border reminds him of the blanket again. He imagines the old woman's hands, slow but sure, guiding the needle through fabric. The air in the room feels warmer now, or maybe it's just him. His assistant leans closer again. "We still head to the podium after this. You okay?" He nods once. "Just thinking about something." A pause, then softer. "Is it about that woman from earlier? I saw her talk to you." Seemed odd. He doesn't answer right away. The image of her face, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she stepped bent to return the boy Sepp's toy car, drifts through his mind. "She had a blanket," he says finally, "with my initials on it." "That could mean anything," his assistant says, her tone practical. "Maybe," he replies, though he isn't convinced. The auctioneer's voice swells again, announcing a record bid for the quilts. Applause follows. Ethan stands, smoothing his jacket, but his eyes are scanning the crowd almost without his permission. That's when he sees her, not far, just near the back exit, as if she's deciding whether to leave. She's holding the blanket close to her chest now, not displaying it like before. Their eyes meet across the space. She doesn't smile, but something in her gaze feels like an invitation, or maybe a test. A man brushes past her on his way out, bumping her shoulder. She steadies herself, then adjusts the blanket. It's such a small motion, but Ethan feels a ripple of something, a memory of clutching something soft and warm when the world felt too big. The auctioneer calls his name, jolting him. He looks back toward the exit. She sits gone again. The applause continues, polite but expectant. He walks toward the stage, feeling the weight of a question he didn't know he'd been carrying until tonight. "I made it for you." The words hang in the quiet corner of the lobby like dust caught in sunlight. Ethan had stepped out after his speech, intending only to take a breath before returning to the reception. He hadn't expected her to be waiting. She stands near a column, the crowd's chatter from the main hall reduced to a low hum behind the glass doors. The blanket is folded neatly in her arms now, the frayed edge just visible. "You followed me out here?" he asks. His voice is calm, but the question feels heavier than it should. "I didn't want to make a scene in there." She takes a step closer, her shoes making no sound on the carpet. "It's steps yours always was." He glances toward the hallway leading back to the auction. The sharp scent of citrus from the polished floors reaches him faintly, mixing with the cooler air from the lobby. "You think I said I'm just going to believe that?" Her fingers trace one of the crooked blue stitches. "I don't think anything. I only know what sep's true." A door opens down the corridor. A little girl in a red dress appears, holding a balloon on a white ribbon. She looks about 4. Her father follows a step behind, adjusting the bow in her hair. The girl pauses when she sees the blanket in the woman's hands. "That's pretty," she says softly. Margaret, he doesn't yet know her name yet, but it fits in his mind, kneels slightly to meet the girl Sep's gaze. "I made it for someone special." The girl tilts her head. "Did they like it?" For a moment, Margaret's eyes flick toward Ethan. "I think so," she says. The father calls gently, and the girl trots off, balloon bobbing behind her. The brief interruption leaves a hush in its wake. Ethan studies her face. The fine lines, the steady eyes. "Why would you have it now, after all this time?" "I kept it," she says simply. "When you were little, you wouldn't sleep without it. You'd press the corner into your cheek until you drifted off." She pauses, her thumb brushing the edge of the fabric. "One day you were gone, and I was told I wouldn't see you again, but I still had this. So I kept it safe." He doesn't move. But inside, something shifts. He can picture it. A boy, maybe 2 years old, clutching this very fabric. But the memory is more like a shape in fog than a clear image. "How did you know I should be here?" he asks. "I read about the auction," she says. "I recognized your name in the program." The overhead lights hum softly. Somewhere behind them, someone laughs, the sound of a joke told too loudly at the bar. He forces his attention back to her. "If you kept this all these years, why now?" "Because I'm running out of time," she says. No tremor in her voice, just a quiet certainty. That's not the answer he expected. A waiter pushing an empty cart rolls past, the clink of glassware briefly filling the space. Ethan steps aside to let him through, and when the noise fades, the woman is still watching him, her expression unreadable. She doesn't plead. She doesn't even seem to want anything from him, except, maybe, to be heard. Ethan exhales slowly. "You could have sent it to me, written a letter." "I thought about it," she admits. "But some things you need to hand over yourself." The blanket shifts slightly in her arms, and the scent of old cotton, faint but distinct, reaches him. It's oddly grounding the way it cuts through the sterile lobby air. A group of guests emerges from the main hall, voices raised in cheerful conversation. The woman steps back toward the column, shielding the blanket from the brush of passing shoulders. "Will you take it?" she asks quietly, as if the question itself might disturb the air. He looks at it again, the worn edges, the crooked stitches, the fading thread. 100 perfectly logical reasons rise in his mind to refuse, and yet none feel as certain as the sudden pull in his chest. "Not tonight," he says finally. Something in her posture softens, but she doesn't look disappointed. "Then maybe another time." She turns as if to leave, but pauses. "My name is Margaret." He nods, unsure whether to offer his hand.
Ethan.
"I know," she says, and walks toward the doors leading out into the night. He watches her go, the blanket still in her arms. The glass doors close behind her with a muted click. For a long moment, he stands there aware of the faint echo of her voice in the quiet lobby. Ethan doesn't usually keep anything on his desk that isn't necessary. No framed family photos, no souvenirs, no knickknacks from past trips. But that morning, his phone sits ignored while his mind circles the image of the blanket. It's early, the city outside is still half asleep, the streets below wrapped in a pale fog. The faint hum of the building's HVAC system fills the silence. He runs a hand over the smooth surface of his desk, as if trying to find something tangible to anchor his thoughts. On the corner of the desk lies an old leather folder. It's been there for months, a stack of documents from his early years, his legal team dug up during some background check. He's never opened it, until now. He flips it open. Inside are photocopies, birth records, court orders, a few grainy black and white photographs. He turns one over and freezes. A small boy, maybe 2 years old, stands on a porch. His hair is slightly too long, falling into his eyes. He's wrapped in a blanket, cream with a blue border. The corner is pressed against his cheek. The office door clicks open. His assistant Amelia steps in with a cup of coffee. The smell of roasted beans breaks his focus. "Morning," she says. "Early start?" He closes the folder halfway. "Couldn't, set sleep." She sets the coffee down, the steam curling in the cool air. "Press is asking for a follow-up on the auction. Want me to handle it?" He nods absently. She glances at the folder but doesn't ask. "You, okay?" she says after a pause. "I'm fine." His voice is even, but the lie is thin. A car horn blares faintly from the street below. Amelia leaves, the sound of her heels fading down the hall. He opens the folder again, studying the photograph. The porch in the background is unfamiliar, but the image feels heavy with something unspoken. As he flips through more pages, he sees a line in one report. "Temporary foster placement, spring 1986. The name of the caregiver is smudged, barely legible, but it starts with an MC. The air in the room feels warmer, though the morning chill hasn't lifted outside. He leans back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Foster care. He remembers almost nothing from that time, only fragments. The sound of someone humming, the smell of soap and flour. A buzz from his phone pulls him back, a calendar alert, meeting in 15 minutes. He closes the folder, but doesn't put it away. Instead, he slips the photograph into his jacket pocket. On his way out, he passes the office kitchen. One of the junior analysts is there, pouring cereal into a paper cup. The kid, barely mid-20s, glances up. "Morning, Mr. Vance." "Morning," Ethan replies. The analyst hesitates, then says, "That speech you gave at the auction. My sister's in foster care. It meant a lot hearing someone talk about it like that." Ethan pauses. "Your sister, how old?" 12. "She's with a good family now." The young man shrugs, but there's a quiet relief in his voice. Ethan nods once, then moves on. But as he steps into the elevator, the words stick with him. A good family now. The photograph in his pocket feels heavier than paper. By the time Ethan gets home that night, the city skyline is a blur of lights beyond his apartment windows. The glass reflects his own image back at him. Suit still crisp, tie loosened but not enough to look casual. He drops his keys into the bowl by the door. The sound is sharp in the quiet. On the kitchen counter, a note from his housekeeper sits beside a covered dish. "Dinner in the oven, heat is needed." He isn't hungry. Instead, he walks to the living room and pulls the photograph from his jacket pocket. He lays it on the coffee table, beside the remote, where it looks oddly out of place against the polished wood and neat stacks of books. It would be easy to believe Margaret's story, too easy. And he's learned not to take things at face value. Every deal he's made has been a mix of truth and what someone wanted him to believe. He sinks into the couch, elbows on his knees. The hum of the refrigerator in the other room is steady, almost soothing, but his mind is restless. His phone buzzes, a text from Amelia. "We ran a quick background check. Nothing concrete yet. Could be a scam. Want me to dig deeper?" He types back, "Not tonight." A muffled thump draws his attention to the hallway. He frowns, standing. The sound comes again, a soft knock at his door. When he opens it, a boy from the apartment next door is standing there, holding a soccer ball. His hair sticks out in uneven tufts, and there's a faint scuff on his cheek. "Sorry, Mr. Vance. It rolled into your hall." Ethan takes the ball, its surface warm from the boy Sep's hands. "You still playing this late?" "My dad let me stay up. We were practicing passes inside." Ethan hands the ball back. The boy grins, showing a missing tooth. "Thanks." "Be careful," Ethan says, but his voice is softer than he expected. When the door closes, the apartment feels different, as if the boy's brief presence left a trace of energy behind. Ethan glances at the photograph again. It would be reckless to get pulled into this woman's story without proof. She could have found the blanket somewhere, stitched the initials herself, memorized a few details from old interviews or articles. People have tried stranger angles to get close to him. Still, he picks up the photo, studying the blurred edges of the porch in the background. Something about the slant of the roof tugs at his memory, but he can't place it. His phone buzzes again, this time, an unknown number. He lets it ring out. On the coffee table, the photograph lies next to his untouched glass of water. The city lights pulse faintly against the walls like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, he feels himself caught between reason and something less measurable, an instinct he's spent most of his adult life ignoring. The next morning, Ethan's office feels colder than usual. The winter sun has barely cleared the neighboring buildings, spilling only a thin slice of pale light across his desk. He sits in his chair with the photograph in front of him, its edges curling slightly from age. The folder of documents is open beside it. He turns the pages slowly, scanning for anything that might confirm Margaret's story. Most of it is legal jargon, dates, and signatures. One entry stands out, a line noting a temporary caregiver, though the last name is smudged. It could be anything, but the first letter, an M, keeps catching his eye. He leans back, rubbing his temple. Logic says to leave it alone. Hire a private investigator. Let someone else sift through the details, keep a safe distance. But logic hasn't silenced the image of her hands on that blanket, or the way her voice caught when she spoke. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. Amelia steps inside without waiting for an answer, balancing a paper bag and a cup of coffee. Brought you breakfast, she says, setting them down. You didn't have to. I know, she pauses, glancing at the photograph, still thinking about her. He doesn't answer. Instead, he slides the photo closer to her. What do you see? Amelia studies it for a moment. Looks like you, about 2, maybe younger. That's definitely you. She squints at the background. This porch could be anywhere. Why? I want to know where it is. Her brows lift. You're actually going to follow this? I just want the facts, he says, though even to his own ears it sounds thinner than the truth. Amelia sets the photograph back down. I can make a few calls. He nods, but when she leaves, he's already searching online for foster home records from the mid-80s. Most of it leads to dead ends, privacy laws, outdated archives. The hum of the city is faint through the glass, the occasional siren cutting through. He's about to close his laptop when an old news article catches his eye. It's a local piece from a small town 2 hours away. The headline is about a charity bake sale in 1987. The photo is grainy, but in the background there's a porch that looks almost identical to the one in his picture. He stares at it for a long moment. The roofline, the railing, even the chipped paint on the steps matches. Beneath the image is a caption listing some of the attendees. One name begins with Marg, before being cut off by the column break. His office phone rings, breaking the quiet. He answers out of habit. Mr. Vance? It's the receptionist. There's someone here asking for you, says she. With the city archives. He hesitates. Send her in. A woman in her 60s walks in, wearing a neatly pressed coat and carrying a thin folder. Sorry to drop by without an appointment, she says. I heard you were looking for records from the late 80s. Thought I could save you some time. He gestures to the chair opposite his desk. You work at the archives? 32 years, she says with a faint smile. I recognize the name. You probably don't remember. But your case passed through our office. She opens the folder and pulls out a faded photocopy. It's a list of foster placements. His name is there alongside a street address, the same small town from the article. Next to it is the caregiver's name, Margaret Holloway. The air in the room seems to tighten. That's her, he says quietly. That's her, he says quietly. The archivist nods. She looked after you for almost a year. He sits back, absorbing the confirmation. It's not proof of everything she's claimed, but it's more than he expected to find this quickly. The archivist closes the folder. I just thought you'd want to know. He thanks her, and after she leaves, the room feels too still. He picks up the photograph again, looking at the blanket draped over his younger self. The details are sharper now, no longer half-imagined. Before he can think it through, he pulls out his phone and dials Amelia. Find her, he says, when she answers.
Margaret Holloway.
Start with that town. There is a pause. Are you sure? Yes. As he hangs up, the low winter light shifts, catching the corner of the photograph. For the first time since the auction, the weight in his chest feels less like doubt and more like a step towards something he can't yet name. The diner is nearly empty when Ethan walks in. The kind of place where the air smells faintly of coffee that's been sitting on the burner since morning, and the vinyl booths squeak when you slide into them. Margaret sits by the window, the blanket folded neatly on the seat beside her. She looks smaller here than she did in the bright, crowded auction hall. He approaches without speaking, and she looks up as if she's been expecting him. "You found me," she says simply. "I had help." The waitress comes by, pours him a cup of coffee without asking. The steam curls upward, catching in the low afternoon light. He wraps his hands around the mug, more for the warmth than the taste. For a moment, they just sit there, the clink of cutlery from the kitchen filling the space. "You said you made it for me," he begins. "You said I was gone one day, and you didn't see me again." She looks down at her hands, the thin skin marked with faint spots, veins visible beneath. "Because I was sick. Really sick. Couldn't take care of you anymore." He waits, sensing there sips more. "They told me it was temporary, that you would come back once I got better." She gives a short, humorless laugh. "But when I did get better, you weren't there. No one told me where you would gone." The sound of the front door opening cuts through her words. A man in his 30s walks in with a little boy, maybe 5, still wearing his soccer uniform. The boy's cheeks are flushed from the cold, his hair sticking up under a knit cap. They pass the table, and the boy glances at the blanket. "That's old," he says in the blunt way children do. Margaret smiles faintly. "Yes, it is." "Why keep it?" the boy asks. She hesitates, then says, "Because it belonged to someone I loved." The boy nods like that makes perfect sense, then follows his father to a booth near the back. When the moment passes, Ethan leans forward. "You could found me. Tried harder." "I did," she says, meeting his eyes. "I wrote letters, called the agency, went to the address they had on file, but it was gone. You were gone." He studies her face, looking for signs of exaggeration, but there's only a quiet steadiness there. "What about my father?" he asks. Her mouth tightens. "I never met him. Only heard his name once, from a caseworker. After that, nothing." The waitress returns with a plate of pie for Margaret, setting it down gently. The smell of cinnamon drifts across the table. "I didn't come to ask for anything," Margaret says, after the waitress leaves. "I just wanted to see you before I can anymore, to know you all right." Ethan glances at the blanket beside her, and that, she says, resting her hand on it, "was the only piece of you I could keep. I thought maybe you want it back." The coffee has gone lukewarm in his hands. He sets it down, fingers tightening briefly on the mug before letting go. He remembers the photograph, the small boy on the porch, the blanket wrapped around him. He remembers the archivist's folder with her name. Facts, not guesses. Still, his voice is cautious when he says, "If this is true, why now? Why not 20 years ago?" Her eyes soften, and for the first time, he notices the faint tremor in her hands. "Because I'm running out of time," she says again. The same words she used in the lobby. "I wanted to see you, not the man in the magazines or on TV, but you, just once more." The boy in the soccer uniform laughs from across the diner, a bright, sudden sound. His father says something quietly, and the boy's giggles fade into the clink of a spoon against a mug. Ethan watches them for a second before turning back to Margaret. "If what you're telling me is true, then someone decided I shouldn't and know you existed." Her gaze doesn't waver. "Yes." Outside, a gust of wind rattles the glass, carrying with it a swirl of dry leaves. Neither of them speaks for a moment. Then, without looking at the blanket, Ethan says, "Keep it, for now." Margaret's mouth curves in the smallest smile, as if she understands that for now is more than she expected to get. 2 days pass before Ethan calls her again. He tells himself he's been too busy. Meetings, deadlines, a board review. But the truth is simpler. He hasn't known what to say. Now he's parked on a quiet street in the small town where she lives. The kind of place where mailboxes lean slightly and porches are part of everyday life. The afternoon sun is low, spilling a warm amber light across the houses. Margaret's home is modest, paint faded, a wind chime swaying gently by the front door. He knocks lightly, and she answers almost immediately, as if she's been nearby. "You found it," she says. There's no surprise in her voice. "I was in the area," he replies, though they both know it's a lie. Inside, the living room smells faintly of lavender and something baking. A knitted throw rests over the back of the couch. On the side table sits a mug of tea, steam curling upward. The blanket, his blanket, is folded neatly on the armchair. She gestures for him to sit, and he chooses the couch. She takes the armchair, the blanket within easy reach. For a while they talk about nothing: the weather, the town's quiet pace, how the bakery down the street still makes everything from scratch. She tells him about the garden out back, how the tomatoes did well this year. He listens, noticing how her voice softens when she talks about small things. It's different from the way people speak to him in boardrooms: no performance, no pitch, just conversation. A knock at the door interrupts them. A neighbor steps in holding a small container wrapped in foil. "Brought you some pie, Margaret," she says. Margaret thanks her warmly, introduces Ethan without fanfare. The neighbor gives a polite nod and leaves as quickly as she came, the screen door clicking shut behind her. When they session alone again, Ethan says, "People seem to like you here." Her smile is gentle. "It's such a good place, quiet, and I said had time to make peace with things." The words hang there, and he feels the pull to ask, "Peace with what?" but doesn't. Set. Instead he glances at the blanket. "You kept it in good shape." "I mended it when it needed mending," she says. "Some years it stayed in a box. Some years I kept it out where I could see it." He thinks about his own home, how empty it feels, even when it's spotless. No objects like this, nothing carrying years of quiet care. "You could have sold it," he says. Not because he believes she would, but to see her reaction. "I could sev," she agrees, "but it wasn't mine to sell." Something in her tone makes him look at her more closely. She's not making a claim on him, she's not asking for recognition or repayment. The blanket is a tether for her, and maybe for him too, though he's only starting to realize it. "Do you ever think about what might have been different?" he asks. "Sometimes," she admits. "But life doesn't give us the version we imagine, only the one we live." The tea on her table has cooled. She takes a slow sip anyway, eyes drifting to the window. Outside, two children race past on bicycles, their laughter carrying through the glass. Ethan finds himself watching her instead of the children. There's a stillness in her presence, but not the kind that feels empty. It's the kind that's earned, like a lake holding the reflection of the sky without trying to keep it. In that moment, he realizes something he's been resisting since the auction. She didn't come to disrupt his life. She came to give him back a piece of it he didn't even know was missing. The thought makes him shift in his seat. His hands tighten briefly, then relax. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this," he says, meaning the blanket, her story, the gap it fills, and the questions it raises. "You don't have to know yet," she replies. "Some things are meant to be carried for a while before you understand their weight." Her words land quietly but firmly, like a stone settling at the bottom of a stream. The oven timer dings in the kitchen, and she rises to check it. The smell of something sweet and warm drifts into the room. She returns with 2 small plates of apple crumble, sets one in front of him without asking if he wants it. He takes a bite. The cinnamon is rich, the apples soft, and for a reason he can't name, it feels like the kind of food you'd make for someone you care about. When he leaves an hour later, the sun has nearly set. He stands on the porch for a moment, looking back at the living room window where the blanket rests on the chair. For the first time since she approached him, the idea of taking it home doesn't feel like a burden, it feels possible. The following week, Ethan's schedule shifts in ways his assistant can't quite understand. Board meetings are moved, lunches rescheduled, a few invitations to high-profile events go unanswered. Instead, he spends his afternoons in meetings with people he's never dealt with before. Directors of foster care agencies, heads of children's charities, small community organizers, who seem surprised to see him in person. It starts with questions. How many children age out of the system without stable homes? How many move from place to place before turning 18? What could help them most? The answers are sobering. One director slides a file across the table to him. "This is a program we tried to start years ago," she says. Funding dried up before we could make it work. He flips through the pages: mentorship programs, job training, mental health support. Things that could have changed the trajectory for kids like the boy in his photograph. By the end of the week, he's committed to funding it entirely. The official announcement happens quietly. No press conference, no photo op, just a small gathering in a community center, the kind with mismatched chairs and bulletin boards covered in flyers. Margaret is there. He didn't tell her he was coming, but when she arrives, someone points him out and she walks over slowly, the blanket folded neatly over one arm. "This is your doing?" she asks. "Part of it," he says. Before she can reply, a young woman approaches with a toddler balanced on her hip. "Mr. Vance, my name's Carla. I was in foster care until I was 18. I just wanted to say, what you start doing matters." The toddler reaches out and grabs a handful of Ethan's jacket. He freezes, then smiles faintly, steadying the boy with one hand. "He's got a strong grip," Ethan says. "Comes in handy," Carla replies with a laugh. She thanks him again before moving on. Margaret watches the exchange with an expression that's hard to read, something between pride and relief. After the speeches, people linger. Kids run between the chairs, weaving around legs. Ethan stands by the refreshment table, sipping water from a paper cup. A boy about 10 years old sidles up beside him, looking at the table of cookies. "You should take one," Ethan says. The boy shakes his head. "They stir for everyone." Ethan smiles. "That's generous of you." The boy shrugs. "My foster mom says sharing makes things taste better." Then, without another word, he darts off to join the others. Ethan finds Margaret near the coat rack, adjusting the blanket on her arm. "You didn't have to come," he says. "I wanted to see what you do," she replies. "Now I know." They walk out together into the crisp evening air. The sky is streaked with the last light of day, fading into deep blue. For a few steps, they don't speak. "You were right," Ethan says finally. "Some things you carry before you understand their weight." She glances at him, then down at the blanket. "And now?" He looks at it, the frayed edges, the stitches worn soft from years of holding. "Now I think it's Stitch's time to take it." She hands it to him without ceremony, and he takes it, feeling the lightness of its weight against the heaviness of what it represents. They stand there for a moment, the sounds of the community center fading behind them. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks. A car door slams. Life goes on, ordinary and unremarkable. But for him, something has shifted. The road narrows as Ethan drives out of the city, the skyline shrinking in his rearview mirror. He keeps one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the passenger seat, where the blanket sits folded. The late afternoon light filters through the windshield, casting long golden shadows across the dashboard. It takes 2 hours to reach the town from the photograph. He slows as the streets become familiar from his searches. Small houses with sloping roofs, a handful of shops, a park with a single swing set. Margaret's old house is at the end of a quiet street, its porch steps still worn in the same spots as in the faded picture. She's already outside, sitting on a wooden chair, a sweater draped around her shoulders. The wind stirs the wind chime above her, its gentle notes carrying on the cool air. "You found it," she says. When he steps out of the car, the hint of a smile tugging at her mouth. "I wanted to see where it happened," he replies. She gestures to the second chair beside her, and he sits. The porch boards creak faintly beneath his weight. From here he can see the street in both directions, the kind of vantage point that makes you feel part of the neighborhood even without leaving your seat. For a while, they don't talk. The air smells faintly of cut grass and wood smoke. Somewhere down the block, a screen door bangs shut, and a child's voice calls out for someone to wait up. Margaret breaks the silence first. "I used to sit out here in the evenings waiting for you to fall asleep. Sometimes I sept hum, sometimes I sept just listen to the crickets." He glances down at the blanket in his lap. His fingers trace one of the crooked stitches. "I can remember it, but I feel like I should." "Some things you remember with your mind," she says softly, "others with your hands." The screen door of the house next door swings open, and a boy no older than 6 steps out holding a jar. He approaches the porch hesitantly. "Miss Margaret, look," he says, holding up the jar. Inside, a single firefly blinks against the glass. Margaret leans forward, smiling. That sip's a good catch. The boy beams, then notices Ethan. Whose steps he? A friend, she says. The boy nods solemnly, as if this explains everything. Wanna help me catch more? He asks.
Ethan.
Ethan shakes his head, smiling faintly. Not tonight, but that sep's a good one You've got there. The boy grins and runs back toward his yard, the jar swinging in his hand. The moment leaves behind a lightness, like the lingering glow of the firefly's light. Margaret settles back in her chair. He reminds me of you at that age, always wanting to bring something home. He studies the blanket again. I think maybe Sepp brought something home this time. They sit until the sun begins to dip below the horizon, the sky turning shades of rose and deepening blue. The wind grows cooler, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. Finally, he speaks. I been in a lot of places, but I don't think I felt like I belonged in any of them, until now. Margaret looks at him for a long moment, then reaches over and rests her hand lightly on his arm. Home is a place you find on a map. It's the place that lets you put your burdens down. The street grows quieter as the evening deepens. A few porch lights flicker on. In the distance, a dog barks once and is answered by another. Ethan stands, then steps inside the house with her. The living room is small but warm, filled with small signs of a life lived here. Framed photographs, a bookshelf crowded with paperbacks, a worn rug that softens the creak of the floor. He drapes the blanket over the back of the couch. For the first time, it's not a relic from someone else's life. It's part of his again. When he leaves later, the air is cool and still. He turns once to look back at the house. Margaret is standing in the doorway, framed by the warm glow of the light inside. For the first time in years, the road ahead doesn't feel like an escape. It feels like a return.